Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Of course, live on YouTube at Stillman and Co. Like and subscribe as we have come out of the bye week. And now for Titans football, 2 months. That's what's left, folks. 2 months of depressing Titan football. And then it's over. And then the offseason starts. And then we can pretend. And then we can hope. And then we can pray, and then we can one day, maybe, we'll see what they do in the offseason, pretend that there is a new horizon for Titan football, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that the Titans might actually be good again. And I want to start with this, because I did watch football yesterday. I'm sure many of you watched football yesterday, and I did watch the Great Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots go to 8-2, winning 7 straight games by beating the Buccaneers 28-23. And look, you could say what you want about the teams that New England beat: Cleveland, Tennessee, Carolina, the Saints. Yeah, they had that one Buffalo win on Sunday Night Football, but that was before people took Drake Maye seriously. But this one, this was a real team. This was a real team. On the road, bad weather, and the Great Mike Vrabel is sitting tied with the Colts, tied with the Broncos, atop the AFC once again at 8-2. And I am a big believer when it comes to this program of being fair. I've always said it. Again, I can have opinions about people, and I don't care if they like me or they don't like me, or that doesn't bother me. But what does bother me is whether or not my opinions are fair. There's nothing that pisses me off more than when I have a negative take about somebody, like I think they stink, or I don't think they're a good coach, or I don't think they're, and somebody links it to something personal, where it's like, you only say that about Will Levis because he went to Kentucky. No, I say it about Will Levis because he stinks. That's why. And with Vrabel at the end there, people were starting to say, it's personal for you with Vrabel. You're taking it out on Vrabel. And I never was. But I want to go to what I think is the hardest part about watching Mike Vrabel have the success that he's having in New England. Because, again, there's no way around it. They were just as bad as you were last year. They came in here and lost an overtime game to you. If they didn't win a meaningless Joe Milton quarterbacked game at the end of the season against Buffalo last year, they would have had the number 1 pick, not you. So as much as we can sit there and talk about how it's everybody else's fault that the Titans stink, and it's definitely not anybody associated with the Titans now's fault, again, New England is 8-2. Now, they went out and spent a fortune in free agency, but the Titans tried that a couple years ago and it didn't work. They do have Drake Maye at quarterback, but Drake Maye was their quarterback last year and he didn't look like this. So I believe in being fair. So when I sit there on a day in and day out basis and I take a victory lap when Sam Darnold lights up another NFC team every single week, and by the way, yesterday was no different. They were up 28-0 before you could blink. Sam Darnold, I think, threw like 9 passes yesterday because they were beating Arizona so badly. But again, I love to tell you all the time about I was right about Sam Darnold. Love to talk about it. Well, then we have to have the conversation about Mike Vrabel. And I'm not the only one around here that thought that when Mike Vrabel got fired, it was time for Mike Vrabel to go. So when I argued at the end of 2023 that Mike Vrabel needed to go, I always said it wasn't just Vrabel. I thought the organization needed to hit the nuclear option. And at the time, what was hilarious about it in hindsight is that the reaction, and it came from around this time of the year in 2023, the Titans went on the road to Jacksonville And they played a Jacksonville team that ended up not making the playoffs because the Titans beat them the last week of the year. But the Titans went to Jacksonville on November 19th, and they lost 34-14 in a game that felt a lot bigger than 34-14. It probably felt something more like 100-7 in that game at Jacksonville. And again, that was 2 years ago. And they went on the road right around Thanksgiving. They lost that game. And I said on my radio show at the time at 5 o'clock, that was when I had to string out 4 hours of topics every day. And I said, if I own the Titans at the end of the year, I'd fire Vrabel and I'd fire Rand Carthon and I'd start over. And the reaction to that was not, how could you fire the great Mike Vrabel? That was not the local reaction. The reaction that I got was, how can you fire a general manager after 1 year? You're racist. That was the reaction, which in hindsight, again, is crazy because Rand was a total doofus and Vrabel, and I'd always said this, Vrabel's a good coach. Vrabel reminded me a lot of Peter Laviolette, who was the Predators coach when they had success. And the thing about Laviolette was I had a great relationship with Laviolette. The thing about Laviolette was he was prickly. He wanted things done his way. He was an asshole, and he pissed off that entire team. But he got them to play better than they ever played. And then eventually, it wore off. And everybody told me Laviolette had to go because he had lost the room. And in hockey, when you lose the room, you got to go. Vrabel had lost his aura here in Tennessee. And some people will blame John Robinson for that. And there's plenty of blame to go around. Some people will blame, most people will blame Amy Adams Strunk for that. And again, I think there's a lot of blame to go around. Vrabel was still a very popular coach when Vrabel was fired. But when it came to the perception of Mike Vrabel, compared to what I considered to be the reality of Mike Vrabel, I thought Mike Vrabel was a good coach who was significantly overrated because of his bravado, because the expectations most people have surrounding the Titans themselves, and the fact that it took him an entire season to figure out how to play Derrick Henry. I felt like the lack of coverage, I feel like the lack of coverage that the Titans got from a national standpoint played into this fugazi notion that Mike Vrabel was some sort of incredible guru coach and that the Titans were just so stupid and holding Vrabel back. When I was watching Vrabel every week do things that were inexplicable. And it took me back yesterday watching the game when I saw right before halftime, with 1 second to go, on the 1 yard line, down by 3 points, Mike Vrabel sent the offense back out there. Now, Drake Maye made a great throw and Stephon Diggs made a great catch, but it reminded me of the Cleveland game in 2023 when the Titans, down by 10, getting the ball back to start the second half, were driving inside the Cleveland 5, and Vrabel decided to go for it with no timeouts. Andre Dillard got singled up with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, obviously, sacked Ryan Tannehill, and that was the end of the half, and I couldn't believe it. And Vrabel's doing the same thing, but this time it worked. And in New England, they are playing Vrabel ball, where it's not the sexiest, but they are going out there. They are tough on defense. They had a huge run yesterday that kind of blew the game open, and the quarterback is making the throws when he has to make them. Now, Drake Maye has more talent at quarterback than Ryan Tannehill ever had. But the quarterback is not going out there and throwing for 450 yards. This is Vrabel ball we're watching. And right now, the Patriots are 8-2. So I go back to how I felt. Because I was fine with Mike Vrabel being fired at the end of the 2023 season. If I owned the team, I would have fired Mike Vrabel. And I was convinced that Mike Vrabel was a good coach. I was not convinced that Mike Vrabel was some sort of incredible, you could not replace him. What are you thinking level coach. And just like a lot of you apparently refuse to do when it comes to Sam Darnold and revise the opinion you used to have, I am wondering if I need to revise the opinion that I used to have on Mike Vrabel. Now, I do not, let me just, again, put this out there to start. I do not think the New England Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl this year. I think if New England were to draw a Buffalo or draw a Kansas City or maybe even draw a Baltimore in the playoffs, they will get beat at home. I know they've already beaten Buffalo. And again, Vrabel always coaches his team up to the occasion. Sometimes it felt like Vrabel at times would coach his team down to the occasion. They haven't had that problem so far in New England. But if they were to face a Kansas City, they were to face a Buffalo, they'd get put out, in my opinion. That being said, the way the young quarterback is playing right now, I think it is very feasible that if he continues to grow, Mike Vrabel can win a Super Bowl with him as the quarterback. Now, again, I don't think it's crazy if Mike Vrabel were to one day win the Super Bowl with an established, good veteran quarterback. But Drake Maye, before he met Mike Vrabel, was not an established, good veteran quarterback. So here's what I thought when the Titans fired Mike Vrabel. And here's the question I have to ask about. Do we revise how we felt then? Do I revise how I felt then? Do I walk it back? Do I admit, you know what, I was wrong on Vrabel? When Mike Vrabel got fired from the Titans, I thought Mike Vrabel was a good coach, period. I did not think Mike Vrabel deserved full control of the roster and operation. He had never worked a day in personnel in his life, and I wasn't convinced that just because Mike Vrabel thought he knew personnel, that Mike Vrabel actually knew personnel. I thought Mike Vrabel was terrible when it came to the coaching staff as far as the Titans were concerned. I think he got lucky with Matt LaFleur, who was identified by the previous general manager, who circled him and interviewed him for the head coaching job and was able to hire him to be the OC, even though I couldn't stand LaFleur when he was the coach of the Titans. But obviously, Vrabel and LaFleur did not get along. They did not play Derrick Henry in 2018. LaFleur gets the Green Bay job, not because of anything that happened in Tennessee. LaFleur got the Green Bay job because he came from Sean McVay and the Rams, and LaFleur wants to take Arthur Smith with him to Green Bay to be the OC. Mike Vrabel says, no. You are not taking Arthur Smith from me. So to spite LaFleur, Vrabel cockblocks him by making Arthur Smith the offensive coordinator here. Arthur Smith was a great offensive coordinator. Mike Vrabel had the great pawpaw, Dean Pease, as his defensive coordinator, whom he played for in New England. And Dean Pease was a good defensive coordinator those first couple of years. And then whatever happened, and I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know, Vrabel and Pease went sideways. And Mike Vrabel promoted Shane Bowen to defensive coordinator. And then after Arthur, we know Todd Downing, the offensive line coach, Keith Carter, he stunk. Vrabel finally fired him. And instead of getting a real offensive line coach, Vrabel went out and he promoted Jason Hodeling, the third assistant, who had never, ever coached in the NFL before he got to the Titans, to be the main offensive line coach. And don't even get me started on Craig Aukerman as the special teams coach with the Titans. As you all know, Vrabel and I had a long back and forth on Craig Aukerman one day. So it takes me to this. Was that a wrong opinion? Because in New England, Mike Vrabel's got a coaching staff of Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator. Even though Todd Downing's on the staff, he's not calling the plays. Josh McDaniels is. Vrabel is having his young quarterback developed by a guy who actually knows how to coach the position. Again, when it comes to McDaniels, Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler. They won 10 games and made the playoffs when McDaniels was the OC in Mac Jones' rookie year. It was only when Belichick brought in Matt Patricia to coach the offense that it absolutely went downhill for young Mac Jones. So the biggest bugaboo that Vrabel had here, offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, Todd Downing, not a problem in New England, because he's got Josh McDaniels. And the crazy thing about McDaniels is I don't think McDaniels is getting a head coaching job. So he's going to be Drake Maye's offensive coordinator probably forever, unless he and Vrabel get sideways like Vrabel got sideways with Dean Pease. Offensive line coach. Again, a point of contention here, whether it was Keith Carter or Jason Hodeling. Vrabel could have brought Keith Carter back with him and made him the line coach. He didn't. He's got Doug Marrone, longtime NFL offensive line coach, former Jacksonville head coach, former Buffalo head coach, former Syracuse head coach. He's got Doug Marrone coaching the offensive line. One of the things that drives me insane about the New England Patriots at 8-2 is the fact that they took Will Campbell with the 4th overall pick, a tackle with short arms who physically looks like a guard. They took him at 4 to play left tackle when Peter Skoronski was drafted here, a guard with the 11th overall pick. Mike Vrabel didn't have the balls to say he picked him as a guard and would never, ever let him play tackle. But again, they have a real line coach. And yes, Jason Hodeling is on the staff, but Jason Hodeling isn't the offensive line coach. Defensive coordinator. Shane Bowen might be the worst defensive coordinator in the NFL. Brian Daboll just got fired in New York. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I know why Brian Daboll got fired. Because, I mean, obviously it's because they lose a lot. But I think a lot of people are saying that Brian Daboll was getting Jackson Dart hurt. I wasn't watching the Giants, so I couldn't tell you. I'll say this when it comes to the Giants. I always felt after I watched that offseason Hard Knocks, I always thought Daboll was a little lazy, and I have a hard time getting over that. The Giants last year had the 24th ranked defense in the NFL, and this year, under Shane Bowen's guidance, they have the 29th ranked defense in the NFL. Shane Bowen was Mike Vrabel's guy, and he's not the defensive coordinator there. Terrell Williams is. Now, Terrell Williams is, and we're thinking about Terrell Williams, and we're hoping for the best for Terrell Williams. But he's out. Zach Kerr, who was on the staff here, is calling the plays. I got to believe Vrabel's the one putting in the defensive game plans. And then he retained the special teams coach there, Jeremy Springer, and did not bring Craig Aukerman on with him. So my biggest point of contention with Vrabel, that he could not build out a coaching staff, that he could only hire guys he knew, only hire guys he trusts. Well, in New England, I don't know how he knows Doug Marrone. Yes, he knows Josh McDaniels because he played for the Patriots when Josh McDaniels was a coach for the Patriots, but he wasn't part of the Vrabel buddy crew. And yet the Patriots in one season, they have turned their team around. They've got solid players. They play Vrabel ball. Drake Maye looks like an ascending franchise quarterback. Was it me who got it wrong when it came to Vrabel? And I just don't know the answer yet. Because the thing about Mike Vrabel, no coach is perfect. And the best coaches have egos. Even Bill Belichick, at the height of his Patriot way, I can do it, you'll see, wanted to replace Tom Brady with Jimmy Garoppolo. Bill Parcells, the guy could build up a team, but man, he couldn't get out of his own way sometimes. I mean, Bill Parcells will win a Super Bowl, go to another team. Go to the Super Bowl, go to another team. And I think Vrabel's cut from the same cloth. Where again, Vrabel seems to be a very good coach, want things done his way, alpha personality, but then he sticks his head up his ass. And ultimately, I do think that happened here. But you have to ask yourself, when it comes to the decision to fire Mike Vrabel, the biggest reason for me that I thought the relationship between Vrabel and the Titans was irreparable was because I felt like too much toothpaste had gone out of the tube. When John Robinson was the general manager and Mike Vrabel was the coach, there was a very defined power structure. John Robinson's in charge, Mike Vrabel's the coach. And when John Robinson got fired, all of a sudden it became incredibly ambiguous. It was, well, who's really in charge? And Rand Carthon says it doesn't matter who's in charge. And Vrabel made this comment about Will Levis, and it's clearly aimed at Rand Carthon. But Rand Carthon's telling TD that everything's good between Vrabel and Carthon. And I felt like that ambiguity was too much. I felt like once you gave Vrabel more power than just the traditional, you're the coach, once you did that, you couldn't take it back. So you either had to go all in on Vrabel and let it be Mike's way, or you had to fire him. And what I thought you should have done, which is start from scratch, they did the opposite. They promoted Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker and hired a noodle brain as head coach, which, again, I wouldn't have done, but that's, again, beyond the point. The one thing I would have never done, I never would have given Mike Vrabel full control. I never, ever, ever would have allowed Mike Vrabel to have full control of a roster. I would never let Mike Vrabel run a draft board. I would never let Mike Vrabel dictate terms for my team because I just didn't think he was experienced in it. And I think it's pretty obvious in New England that they're doing things Mike Vrabel's way. That even though Elliott Wolf's there, Elliott Wolf's 2024 draft class has basically all been gutted. This is Mike Vrabel's team. Mike Vrabel is the coach. Mike Vrabel is the general manager. Mike Vrabel is running the Patriots. And even though I didn't think Vrabel could run personnel like this, they're 8-2. I kept saying when it came to coach openings, and I knew Jerry Jones was never going to hire an ego like Vrabel. Because if you hire Vrabel, Vrabel becomes the star and you become secondary. Jerry Jones is never going to do that. But I said, if I'm hiring Vrabel, I'm hiring him in Dallas, where Dak Prescott is an established quarterback in his prime who doesn't really need a coach to bring him up. I'm hiring him in Jacksonville, where Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback, and I can get an offensive coordinator for Trevor Lawrence, and we're going to try to get the best out of Trevor. But again, Trevor doesn't have to learn the NFL from me. What I didn't think was possible was Mike Vrabel coaching a team with a young quarterback and Mike Vrabel developing the young quarterback. Well, right now, the betting favorite for league MVP is Drake Maye. And there's one thing I talk about when it comes to other teams that I think we do have to look at the Titans and say, this might be you. Geno Smith doesn't suck. Sam Darnold doesn't suck. Todd Bowles doesn't suck. Robert Saleh might get another chance as a head coach because people think he doesn't suck. But yet the Jets, they always suck. How many coaches, how many quarterbacks, how many do you have to go through and have people have success elsewhere before you look in the mirror and you realize you are the problem? I'm not saying Brian Callahan doesn't suck. He sucks. Rand Carthon is incompetent. I have no faith in Chad Brinker. But are we sure that Will Levis was really that bad, or did you fuck him up? Because again, Mike Vrabel was winning 7 and 6 games at the end here. And Mike Vrabel certainly hasn't lost anything as a coach. And that's what makes this all really depressing, is we can talk about Brinker, and we can talk about Borgonzi, and we can talk about the next coach. And apparently every single candidate out there, Titan fans don't like. They don't like Matt Nagy. They don't like Doug Peterson. They don't like Mike McCarthy. They apparently don't like any of them. We can talk about all those things. But if you as an organization are so incompetent that you could have the best coach in the league and fire him and get nothing in return, even when people think that, like, that's when I have to ask the question of, is this organization ever going to get it figured out? So I'm not ready to walk back my criticisms of Vrabel with his coaching staff here in Tennessee. I am not ready to walk back the idea that Mike Vrabel had to go because I didn't think Vrabel could run the organization effectively. But week by week in New England, it is looking like you did make the mistake that a lot of people, including the national media, said you were making at the time when you fired Mike Vrabel. I am not fully committed today to say it was an absolute unmitigated disaster to fire Mike Vrabel, that firing Mike Vrabel will go down in the history books of the Tennessee Titans as one of the biggest blunders all time, maybe even bigger than when the Houston Oilers fired their version of Mike Vrabel in Bum Phillips. But I'm getting there. And this is from somebody who was often critical of Vrabel. Now, I've always said Vrabel's a good coach, and I've always said I like Vrabel, even if Vrabel doesn't like me. But it's hard to watch the New England Patriots right now. And it was easy for me when they were beating Carolina to just shrug it off and say, well, that's Carolina. Carolina sucks. When they go to Tampa Bay and they beat Tampa with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. They've won 7 straight. If the playoffs started today, they're the number 2 seed in the AFC. If the season ended today, according to the sports books, Drake Maye would be the favorite for MVP. Maybe I'm a little biased here. I don't know how you don't give it to Sam Darnold. Like, I don't know how you wouldn't give it to Sam Darnold for MVP. That's just me. But again, when it comes to Vrabel and the Titans, I mean, I'm looking at it right now with him in New England, and they were as bad as you last year. You beat them. So I got to say, when it comes, this is something I'm keeping an eye on. Now, again, I still think the Patriots are going to finish something like 10-7, although their schedule is so horse-shittingly easy. It's so the Jets this week, the Dolphins, those kind of teams, the Titans. So they'll probably win 11 games or something like that. I think they'll get put out in the first round of the playoffs. And it'll be a lot like when you lost to the Ravens at home in 2021. But right now, Mike Vrabel, man, he is just lighting it up. And it's hard for me not to say when it comes to Vrabel that he's not looking the part. So speaking of Vrabel, there is something he said today that we have got to get to. And we will get to that here in just a second. First, I want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home. They are the presenting sponsor of this show, and they have taken care of my home long before they became the presenting sponsor of anything that I did, although they have sponsored me for a long time, and I love that about them. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990. They're family-owned and operated with 100% satisfaction. Of happy you'll be or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. You can learn more by visiting happyhiller.com. That's where I actually go to book all of my stuff. I just go right to happyhiller.com. It's very easy. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians that come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value, and they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. And they'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Vanderbilt Commodores. Hiller, call the Happy Face truck today. So, the great Mike Vrabel sitting there at 8-2. He can do no wrong. He is the king right now of Boston. And you do have to tip your cap to Mike Vrabel. Now, we'll see. But I got to get to something Vrabel said today. He was doing his weekly interview on sports radio station WEEI in Boston. Vrabel does a Monday morning interview. And he was asked about the rumor that picked up a lot of steam around here last week that Amy Adams Strunk was unwilling to deal with Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. Again, the rumor was New England was interested in Tony Pollard and Arden Key, and the Tennessee Titans said, we are not going to trade with Mike Vrabel. Vrabel was asked about that on WEEI today. Here's what Mike Vrabel said.
And there was a report last week that the Titans owner, Amy Adams Strunk, was unwilling to talk trades with this team. Is that accurate, or is that just nonsense?
I haven't talked to Amy since the day she fired me. So her name and my name should not be in the same sentence together, because I haven't talked to her since the day she fired me.
Mike Vrabel just letting it fly. My favorite part about that, when it comes to Vrabel talking about the Amy thing, is he did not confirm nor deny. Now, again, I said last week, word on the street is Vrabel made it up. That's what people are saying. And again, I'm giving Vrabel the benefit of the doubt. I think he made some kind of offhanded remark like, oh yeah, she probably wouldn't trade with me. And then somebody took it seriously, and that's how it blew up. But that was an opportunity for Vrabel to write the record, and he didn't. But he did let you know one thing right there. He let you know he still hates Amy Adams Strunk. He let you know I haven't talked to her since the day that she fired me. So fuck her, and her name shouldn't be anywhere near mine. Fuck them. And you can do that when you're 8-2. And you can do that when she's 1-8. And that's just the reality about where things stand. But I didn't think it was, I felt like it was pretty obvious to me that Vrabel made it up. And if that was true, that they wouldn't do it, I think Vrabel probably would have let you know. Instead, in typical Vrabel fashion, he probably knew this was coming. That was probably a rehearsed answer. Vrabel goes right at Amy, and he doesn't say anything about her, but he says everything about her. Saying, that woman, that woman doesn't mean shit to me. Fuck her. That's what he said. Now, I was thinking about how I feel about Vrabel. And I got to tell you, these coaches, they're like stocks. So I was thinking today, I was like, let's do a chart of Jared's feelings towards Mike Vrabel over the years. So let's start at 2018 with Mike Vrabel, where, again, the Titans were 9-7, but they were 9-7 the year before. And so, you know, I had some faith in Vrabel, but I was pretty skeptical. So I put myself right in the middle there on Vrabel in 2018 because he achieved what they had achieved the year before. Everybody in town was like, oh, he's such a great coach. And I'm like, he's doing the same as the guy before. The next year, 2019, AFC Championship game, and you got to admit, Mike Vrabel, kind of as far as how you could feel about him, towards the top of the league. The way that team in the middle of the season switched quarterbacks and they ended up in the AFC title game. At that point, I'm starting to think Mike Vrabel might be one of the best coaches in the NFL. The next year, 2020, even though the Titans were good in 2020, they won the division. They won 11 games. They didn't win 11 games in 2019. They were 9-7. But Vrabel dipped for me in 2020. And the reason Vrabel dipped was because the Shane Bowen elevation to defensive coordinator without the defensive coordinator title was such a clusterfuck that year. And the defense was so bad. 28th in the NFL. The offense was second in the NFL. They were elite. But the defense was so bad that I had to pin that on Vrabel. And I had to say, Vrabel thinks he's going to come in here and be like Belichick and be like Parcells and not have a real defensive coordinator. And Shane Bowen's calling the plays, but we didn't know that until after the year. If you remember, Corey Curtis had an infamous rant on News 2 about Vrabel. Apparently pissed Vrabel off pretty bad from what I heard. Corey Curtis had an infamous rant about Vrabel and his arrogance. And I think that, again, that kind of dropped him, in my opinion, a little bit as a coach in 2020. The next year was 2021. And that was the year that they had 90 players. And they were the number one seed in the AFC. And they did that with Derrick Henry with a broken foot. And at that point in time, I thought Mike Vrabel was the best coach in the NFL. That at that point in time, after the 2021 season, I thought the Titans have the best coach in the NFL. He motivates these guys better than anybody else. He can get more orange from the juice. No, excuse me, more juice from the orange. He can get more juice from the orange than any coach in the NFL. To me, at that point in time, I remember saying Vrabel, McVay, Shanahan. Those are the three best coaches. Didn't count Andy Reid in that group at that time. Vrabel, Shanahan, McVay. And even after they lost the playoff game in which Mike Vrabel, I thought, stupidly went for two. Not sure that totally affected it. My blame for losing that Cincinnati playoff game was not Mike Vrabel. It was Ryan Tannehill. So at 2021, thought he was the best coach in the league. He took a little bit of a dip, but not a big dip. Like again, in 2022, even though they lost the last 7 games of the season, I blamed Amy for that because I thought that was the owner sticking her fucking nose in shit she didn't need to do by firing the general manager in the middle of the season. And so Vrabel took a little bit of a dive because they had such an end to that season, but I still thought he was better than I thought in 2018 and even 2020. Because again, I didn't blame Vrabel for those 7 games at the end of the year. Now, when he made Tim Kelly the offensive coordinator and Jason Hodeling the line coach after the season, I started to have some serious revelations. But reservations. But again, still thought Vrabel was a pretty good coach. Then there was 2023. In 2023, I still thought Vrabel was a good coach, but I thought he was overrated as a great coach. Because if he was such a great coach, with Tannehill and Henry and Harold Landry and Jeffrey Simmons, and with that group, he would have found a way to win more games than 6. At least that's what I thought. If he was such a good coach, and his coaching hires were pathetic. So I was a little down on Vrabel. As of right now, I think I have to be not where I was in 2021 when I thought Mike Vrabel was the best coach in the league, because I don't think Mike Vrabel's the best coach in the league. I think Kyle Shanahan is the best coach in the league. But he's probably as high up as he's been since then, since I thought he was the best coach in the league in 2021. And I got to give Vrabel credit for this too. And maybe this should have elevated him some on the chart as far as where he stands now. He does have personnel control in New England. And I was very skeptical about the idea of giving Vrabel personnel control with the Tennessee Titans because, again, he had never done it. So that's where I stand on the Mike Vrabel front. The Great Mike Vrabel. Normally, we get to the second topic before we get to your reaction, and we will here, but we will get to your reaction on Vrabel because a lot of you want to chime in on it. And I was waiting for Tampa Bay to kick the shit out of New England yesterday so I could be like, oh, great. Vrabel can beat these bad teams, and he surprises Buffalo, but he gets thrown into the fight against a real team, and look at him now. And instead, I watch that game, and I'm like, they controlled that entire game. They were out there playing Vrabel ball, and you got to give them credit for that. Now, as far as the Titans are concerned, let me just say this. This was a great weekend for the Titans. I know they didn't play a game on Sunday, but it was a great weekend. And it started on Saturday. It wasn't just Sunday with the Jets winning and the Saints winning and the Dolphins winning, as it has kind of cleared a path for the Titans to have the number 1 pick in the draft, although the Titans have to do their part and lose every game the rest of the way. You would not have had the number 1 pick last year if the Giants hadn't beaten the Colts in a meaningless game that nobody expected, or the Patriots beat the Bills in a meaningless game that nobody expected. So keep that in mind. But on Saturday, I think Fernando Mendoza at Indiana established himself as the top quarterback in the draft class. Now, this was kind of the first time that I really watched Indiana, because I was in a wedding the day that they played Oregon, so I didn't watch that game. So I watched Indiana play Penn State, and I watched Mendoza play, and I see a more athletic version of Jared Goff. That's kind of what I saw out of Fernando Mendoza. The way he plays, his body size, the way he throws the ball, it reminds me a lot of Jared Goff. Now, he's more athletic than Jared Goff, and that 2-minute drive he led to win the game against Penn State showed me that he has some real balls, which is what I worry about when it comes to Jared Goff, that he might not actually have. But I see, when I watch Mendoza play Saturday, I see some Jared Goff. Well, Jared Goff's good enough to go with the number 1 pick. If Jared Goff had been on the board in this past draft, the Titans would have taken Jared Goff number 1 over Cam Ward. Jared Goff, again, he's not Peyton Manning. He's not Andrew Luck or John Elway. He's not Trevor Lawrence. But he's not a manufactured number 1 overall pick. That's a guy who is worthy of a number 1 pick. So Fernando Mendoza looked that way on Saturday. And Dante Moore Jr. did not look that way for Oregon. And word on the street is Dante Moore's going to go back to college. So that leaves Ty Simpson maybe in the mix. But in what was supposed to be this great quarterback class with Arch and Lenora Sellers and Drew Aller and Cade Klubnik, and all those guys are out. So Fernando Mendoza is really the only guy who right now you can put it down and say, yep, that dude's going top of the draft. And if you're the Titans and you end up with the number 1 pick in the draft, you want there to be one guy at the top of that draft at quarterback. By the way, Matt Miller at ESPN wrote, when asked about whether or not Fernando Mendoza had established himself as the clear quarterback in the class, said, quote, Indiana's Fernando Mendoza has clearly established himself as the top quarterback in the 2026 class, even ahead of underclassmen Dante Moore and Ty Simpson. Sure, he's had a few rough moments against Penn State, including a bad interception, but he rallied in the fourth quarter and he led the Hoosiers back with a wild go-ahead touchdown throw with under a minute on the clock. Mendoza flashed more mobility in the Penn State win, including an 18-yard touchdown run, while maintaining his trademark poise in the pocket and arm talent to execute plays all over the field. New York Jets, come on down. Cleveland Browns, come on down. New Orleans Saints, come on down. If there's only one guy in the class worth a shit, and you, the Tennessee Titans, have the number one pick, you can name your price. You can do what they do in baseball. When it comes to Japanese players, it's a posting system where the Japanese team will post Shohei Ohtani, and every Major League Baseball team has to make a blind bid as to what they would pay in order to get this guy. You could do that. You could go to the combine if you had the number one pick and you could say, number one pick, Mendoza is open for business. We're staying in room 1734. Slide it under the door. Give me your best offer now. And I bet you get a whole hell of a lot. So this weekend was actually a very good weekend for the Titans. Jets win, Saints win, Dolphins win. The path is clear for the Titans now that as long as they don't beat New Orleans at the end of the year, they're probably going to have the number one pick. And now there's a quarterback at the top of the draft that I think everybody is circling and saying, this guy's worth the number one pick. Now, I don't want to bring this up yet, but I'm sure this will come up at some point. There are a couple of questions. Let's say you get the number one pick, and let's say Mendoza's there. And Mendoza, to me, is not some sort of superstar quarterback prospect that I lose my pants over. The way that I actually felt about Drake Maye and Caleb. Like Caleb Williams had the talent. I didn't like Caleb Williams' personality, but I would have taken him number one. I would have taken Drake Maye too over Jaden Daniels, which this time last year seemed foolish, but I mean, I really do like Drake Maye. And obviously Drake Maye's playing great right now. I don't love Mendoza. I mean, I haven't watched enough of him to love or hate, but I mean, he looks like a number one pick. So then I think the question you have to ask yourself is, what if you evaluate Fernando Mendoza? What if you evaluate him as better than Cam Ward? But that's a different discussion for a different day. And I know a lot of you out there are going to be like, no, Jared, no, we're not doing this. He's so good. No. Oh, here we go. Distinguished gentlemen. So Mendoza is better than Cam. I mean, personally, I think Mendoza is better than Cam. I'm not in love with Cam Ward. I'm not. Well, obviously I'm not in love with Cam Ward, but I was in love with Cam as a prospect. And it's not like I've seen anything in the NFL that's changed my opinion about Cam as a prospect. If anything, it's worse because Cam hasn't been very good. Vidal says, yes, you were wrong about Mike Vrabel, and he was right to embarrass you in that presser that day. I don't know which one you're talking about. I don't know if it's the Think Like a Man press conference or if it was the Craig Aukerman one. I felt like on both fronts, I was kind of proven right because those both ended up being super sore subjects in the end. I'll say this about Vrabel in the press conference. That never bothered me. I never got angry, took it personally, never. I remember when it happened. And it's funny because Vrabel was like, Jared, if you want to think like I'm thinking, think. And I looked, I was like, think the opposite. And he was like, yeah, think like a man, think like a dude, think like and I was sitting there as that was going on, just smiling because I knew in my head, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good for the radio. I'm like, this is great for the radio. So when it comes to this idea that, oh yeah, Vrabel, he was right to embarrass you. He showed you. You haven't liked Vrabel since then. It wasn't that. I care more about the fact that he made Tim Kelly the offensive coordinator and kept Craig Aukerman as a special teams coach than I would have cared if Mike Vrabel got to the podium and was like, fuck Jared Stillman. I don't care about that. It's like, I think I could say this. Mike Morganzi said to me the other day, he was like, so you're from here, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so you're a Titan fan, right? I'm like, yes. Now, that doesn't mean I ain't going to say what I think because, I am tired of you guys sucking. But Yes, I'm a fan. So I care more about the winning and the losing than I do about this idea that like, oh yeah, Vrabel, he didn't like it. He didn't. I like Vrabel. I don't know how Vrabel feels about me. Probably doesn't like me. Probably the same way he felt about Amy. You know, if they were to ask him about me on WEEI, I'd probably say the same thing. One person says, it had to be game management for Brian Daboll with the Giants. The Giants had a 96 or better chance to win in 4 of their recent losses. The Giants could easily be 6-2. I didn't keep up with it. I'll say this. So yesterday I had the 4 boxes going on YouTubeTV watching the games, and I was keeping an eye on the Giants-Bears game, but we've got, it was the bye week, Cousins in town. I did not watch the very end of the early window games. I thought the Giants were going to beat the Bears, and then I turned around and saw that the Bears beat the Giants, and I thought, what the fuck happened there? So all I'll say about Brian Daboll is this. Brian Daboll outperformed expectations year 1, and I feel like it ruined him for really the rest of his Giant tenure. So if you go back to when Brian Daboll was hired as head coach of the Giants, they were bad. And not only were they bad, but they were bad with Daniel Jones, and they weren't committing to Daniel Jones. They declined the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones. And once they declined that 5th-year option on Daniel Jones, it was obvious that they didn't believe in him. Somehow that year they made the playoffs. And because of that, now Daniel Jones needs a contract, and they gave him one. And they tagged Saquon Barkley, and they got too caught up, in my opinion, in trying to win the negotiation with Barkley than they should have. They should have just given Barkley the deal and tagged Jones and made him prove it to them. Well, I think they went into 2022 thinking they were going to be so bad that they were going to be able to draft Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, and then they weren't. So now it's like, well, we have a playoff team, so let's try to win. And Saquon Barkley gets hurt, and now it's all Daniel Jones out there, and Daniel Jones gets hurt, and so now they're screwed. And they had the 6th pick, so they couldn't get Drake Maye, who they desperately wanted before last year's draft. And so they ran it back with Daniel Jones, and then this year they were picking 3rd, not 1st, so they couldn't take Cam Ward. Matthew Stafford didn't want to go there. Aaron Rodgers didn't want to go there. So they had to take Jackson Dart. I don't know if Daboll's a good coach or not. I watched the off-season Hard Knocks 2 years ago, the one that they'll never do again because Joe Shane, the general manager, looked so stupid doing it. I walked away from that television show thinking Brian Daboll was too lazy to be a good head coach. He's sitting there in a meeting with the general manager and the owner, and he's got his feet up on the table. And again, maybe I'm wrong about that. I just felt like Daboll was too lazy. That's all I got for you on Daboll. And I do think we need to have a discussion later in the week about whether or not Brian Daboll belongs on the list as far as head coaching candidates for the Titans is concerned. Also should be noted, Mike Kafka, we put him on the board because Mike Borgonzi made those comments about, wanting a coach that works with a general manager, and they work together in Kansas City. He will be the interim head coach as far as the Giants are concerned. Brady says firing Vrabel wasn't the biggest issue. Hiring Callahan after Vrabel was the problem. Wrong. The problem was when Amy Adams Strunk signed John Robinson and Mike Vrabel to extensions. I don't remember exactly what her statement was, but it was something along the lines of, now our general manager and head coach will walk together, i.e., you two are together, you two make it work. And I don't know what happened between Robinson and Vrabel. They speak positively about one another. Again, I don't know what went on in between. Maybe there's something, maybe there's not. I don't know. But when Robinson got fired, Amy decided to keep Vrabel aboard. And she wanted to hire Rand Carthon because, and a lot of people have a lot of different theories for this. Personally, I believe the league office got involved. I believe the league office convinced Rand to take the job just as much as they convinced the Titans to hire Rand. But Amy had heard Rand Carthon, Amy Adams Strunk and Burke Nihill had heard Rand Carthon at the Accelerator Summit. And that was, I guess, where Amy decided that was the guy that she liked. But Vrabel didn't like Rand Carthon and thought that Rand Carthon should be assistant general manager, shouldn't be general manager. And I said at that point, Amy had to make a choice, and she didn't. So I thought that whole shotgun marriage thing was stupid. But their get-out-of-jail-free card was Tannehill's gone, Henry's gone, you have all this salary room, a decent draft pick. Now's the time to blow it up. Bring in an experienced football guy who you know knows how to run an organization and let him do with the team whatever you want. And Amy promoted Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker. And it's been nothing but downhill since. I don't think hiring Callahan was the problem. I understand the coach is more forward-facing. I think the problem was promoting Rand Carthon to that chief position maker. So I'm not going to say it's all about, I think Callahan's a bozo, but I think he was more of a symptom than he was a cause. And maybe Rand, more of a symptom than a cause, and it all goes back to Amy. The distinguished gentleman says it was an unfair firing, but you can't do the things that you did towards Amy and expect to have a job. There were a lot of shenanigans at the end. That is true. Again, that New England thing where he was like, it's not as good everywhere else, and then he didn't go to the owner to clear it up, that's kind of bullshit. Like, that's, Mike, you got to be an adult. You got to be accountable for what you said. And it's just easy to say, that's not what I meant. Or first say, okay, Mike, that's fine. That mean guy on the radio, he was probably making it all up. Jude says, people thought Vrabel was crazy to have a running back intentionally drop on a third down instead of walking in for a touchdown and relying on fourth down. Huh? Leave that one there. Trent says, proud of you for being reasonable and fair, Jared. Again, I am reconsidering whether or not my feelings towards Mike Vrabel were accurate. My opinion of him as a coach, potentially running an organization, whether or not that was accurate, I'm willing to have that conversation when the Patriots turn their team around in 1 year under the great Mike Vrabel. Sanchez said, Bowen and Downing suck. New England loves Downing right now, and New York hates Bowen. Vrabel just didn't have a great staff here. He has one now. So I'm of the belief that Robert Kraft was the one that basically told Vrabel, Mike, I would really prefer if we had Josh as the offensive coordinator. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I believe that that is why Drake May's having the success he's having. But again, if Vrabel told Kraft over my dead body, then he would have to go with Vrabel and let him hire Todd Downing. So I can't just take that away from Vrabel. As convenient as it would be towards an argument to say that Vrabel wasn't that good, I just can't take that away from Vrabel. But it is obvious that he has a much better coaching staff in New England than he ever had here. And, I mean, again, Drake Maye is an elite talent. If Drake Maye, who, again, was drafted in 2024, if Drake Maye was available in 2022, he would have been the first overall pick in the draft. If he was available in 2023, it is debatable as to whether or not he would have been the top pick in the draft. He ended up going as the third pick in his draft because that was a loaded draft. He would have been the first pick in the draft this year, and he would be the first pick in the draft next year. Drake Maye is an elite talent and always was. I'll never forget. I remember like it was yesterday. I was at Bridgestone Arena, and there were some rumors that were coming out about Drake Maye might be falling in the draft. And the midday show at the radio station had Tim Hasselbeck, and I texted Caroline, and I said, hey, I need you to ask Tim Hasselbeck, who before becoming the Innsworth coach had called a bunch of ACC games. And I said, I want you to ask Tim Hasselbeck, if Drake Maye falls to the seventh pick, what should they do? So Caroline asked Tim Hasselbeck, and Tim Hasselbeck's like, take Drake Maye. And so we had the discussion on the show, like, okay, what do you do? Do you take Drake Maye? Do you, trade the pick? Do you trade Levis? And I said, I'd take Drake Maye and I'd trade Levis for a second round pick. And the amount of people that were like, you fucking idiot. Why would you take Drake Maye when you have Will Levis? Never gets old. Never gets old. Kai says, let's see how Mike Vrabel does in the playoffs when he plays good teams consistently. Plus, the Bucs have a lot of players hurt at the moment. I will agree with that. I mean, Mike Evans is hurt. Chris Godwin is hurt. The running back's hurt. The offensive line's just kind of getting back there. But Tampa Bay is a real team. That was on the road in the elements. And after halftime, New England controlled the game. I'm not taking anything away from that Vrabel win right there. That was real Vrabel ball. That was when you think of the good days of Mike Vrabel. That's what it looked like. So I'm not taking, even though Tampa Bay's got injuries, I'm not taking anything away from Vrabel. You can, if you want to be a hater, that I can't. Adam says, I always thought Derrick Henry made everyone look good until 2021 when Derrick Henry got hurt and Vrabel kept it going. So yes, I think he's a great coach, but I still think, Adam says, Derrick Henry was the main reason. So if you go back to 2021, and I remember doing this and talking to TD about this before they traded A.J. Brown. So the real line of demarcation for the 2021 Titans winning was not whether or not Derrick Henry was in there. It was whether or not A.J. Brown was in there. So when the Titans started to lose games right around Thanksgiving, they lost at home to the Texans. They went on the road to New England and lost to Mac Jones. And I think they lost another game in there somewhere. That was when A.J. Brown was out. And then A.J. Brown came back and they started winning games again. They played San Francisco on a Thursday night at home when A.J. Brown returned. And Ryan Tannehill just started throwing. And Tannehill was awful, like Rusty Smith level bad in the first half. And Tannehill just started throwing the ball right in the direction of A.J. Brown the rest of the game. A.J. Brown was probably at that point the most valuable player on the team, even more so than Derrick Henry. But the point stands. You know, with Vrabel, Derrick Henry delivered a lot of Vrabel's success. And go back to 2018 when Vrabel had David Fluellen ahead of Derrick Henry on the depth chart. Next says maybe Vrabel can get his third playoff win this year. Again, if I was Kansas City, I'd want New England in the playoffs. That's who I'd want. MB says, too many Titans fans are butthurt. Vrabel's a good coach. Amy screwed up. Stop defending her just because she's the Titans owner. Me? Me defend the Titans? Give me a break. Come on now. Unbelievable. Speaking of the Colts, I do want to get to the Colts here for a second. So right now, if the AFC playoffs were to start today, the Indianapolis Colts would be the number 1 seed in the AFC. And that's after yesterday morning's win in Germany, where despite the fact that they turned the football over and Atlanta had a lead late, Daniel Jones let them down. They tied the game, and Jonathan Taylor walked it off in an all-world performance by JT. And let me just say this about the Colts. I may be wrong. I thought the Colts were crazy to trade 2 first-round draft picks for a corner because I don't think corners in 2025 are worth 2 first-round draft choices. But when I watch the Indianapolis Colts, I see the old Titans. The Tannehill, Henry, A.J. Brown, solid defense Titans. With Jonathan Taylor starring as Derrick Henry. Tyler Warren is the impact rookie that A.J. Brown was in 2019, and Daniel Jones is the failed quarterback draft choice turned comeback player of the year that Ryan Tannehill was. At the end of the day, that Titan team, that was tough, good on the offensive line, solid defensively. They had a shelf life and a ceiling. They went on the road and beat Tom Brady on a team that wasn't very good in New England that year. And then they went into Baltimore with what might be Baltimore's best team and outplayed the Ravens in one game. But after getting through Brady and Lamar, Tannehill couldn't do it a third time against Mahomes. Every time the Titans would lose over the years, people would say, can't win with a running back. Even though Josh Allen would lose roughly at the same spot in the playoffs every year, and nobody ever said Buffalo couldn't win with a quarterback. So here's Indy. And I don't know if I'm rooting against Indy. I probably am because they're a rival of the Titans. But in our society where everybody wants to have Mahomes and nobody ever thinks that Alex Smith was any good, I do wonder if Indianapolis has enough firepower to beat the good teams in the AFC in the playoffs. Can they beat Buffalo? Can they beat Kansas City? Can they beat Baltimore if Baltimore finds their way into the playoffs? I'm going to say no. I feel the same way about New England. I feel the same way about Denver. Right now, if the playoffs were to start today in the NFL, it would be a very, very crazy playoff picture. Given the fact that going into the year, I don't think anybody thought the Indianapolis Colts would be the number 1 seed. As of right now, if the playoffs were to start today, which again, we're only halfway through, the Colts would have a bye. Denver would host Jacksonville in the first round of the AFC playoffs. New England would host Buffalo, and we'd get the Chargers on the road going to Pittsburgh, which we just saw the Chargers in Pittsburgh last night. And I would prefer to not see that matchup ever again. Jacksonville's not going to make the playoffs unless they win the division, a la whatever. I guess actually, technically, Jacksonville would be the division leader. And so it would be, by my count, the Chargers would go to Jacksonville. Buffalo would still be going to Denver. And I don't know. The whole point, I guess I'm saying is, I still think Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore are the teams to beat. I don't take these. I can't see Daniel Jones winning 3 games in the AFC playoffs. I just can't see it. Like, I just, maybe I'm wrong. I just can't see Daniel Jones in Indiana. Congratulations. You made it past Atlanta yesterday, who I think, and I haven't watched a ton of Atlanta, I think they're kind of dog shit. Congratulations. You made it past them. I went on a Colts podcast before the last Titans-Colts game, and I compared the Colts to the 2019 Titans, and boy, those people hated it. They were like, oh, God, we're so much better than 2019 Titans. Let's see if you guys get to the AFC title game, and then tell me. And they also don't have the great Mike Vrabel as their coach. One last one. Monday Night Football tonight should be a good one, and if you've got YouTube TV, you can't watch the game. Because Monday Night Football, ABC, ESPN, not on YouTube TV, as YouTube TV and Denver and Disney continue to get after one another. And it was one thing last week when it was the shitty Cardinals against the underwhelming Cowboys. This is the Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions, against the Green Bay Packers. And there are going to be a lot of people that are upset that they're not going to be able to watch this game. I think this is terrible. And the end result of this, I think it's going to be terrible for us, the fans. Here's what I will say, though. If I can give advice, I actually did read that book, the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book. And one thing I took away from that book is that guys always want to try to fix things. They put their fix-it hat on. And sometimes women with their problems, they just want to be heard. But I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice here. With the $20 credit that YouTube is apparently going to make everybody jump through hoops in order to get. Go buy one antenna that works for the over-the-air channels. It's not an end-all be-all because there are going to be some games on ESPN down the road that are worth watching, college football especially, college football playoff, but I assume they will have this figured out by the playoff. But the best Monday night games also go on ABC. And if you get an antenna that streams those games for free, then yes, it's a one-time $20 purchase that you don't want to make, I don't want to make. But the next time that there's a dispute like this, and there will be, you'll be entitled to ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, who have the best games, the Masters. You won't get every round, but you'll get Sunday. The NCAA tournament. If there's an issue with CBS down the road, you'll get it. So that would be my advice if you're on the outside looking in for Monday Night Football tonight. Just go buy the antenna. That's what I would say. That's it for us. We are out of here today. Great show. Thank you to Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. We're back tomorrow at 2 o'clock as the Titans season continues. Stillman & Company. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. that they need to like and subscribe as well. Stillman and Company. We'll see you all tomorrow at 2.